Today we're rebuilding our forks on a KL250 Sherpa. Now when we removed these, we noticed the seals were leaking, the oil was extremely dirty, so they're going to need to be torn down, cleaned up, new parts, and get ready to go before we put them back on the bike. Now before you dive into your forks to rebuild them, you want to have a few basic tools laid out to make the job a little more smooth and efficient. First thing, have some rags ready because this can get a little bit messy. Next, you need something to measure your fluid with. You also will need some good quality fluid of the correct weight. You will need a fork seal driver to properly install your fork seal. You will also need at the end oil level gauge to set your fork oil level properly to get good performance out of your newly rebuilt forks. Now we're going to remove the cap. This should have been loosened while the forks were still installed in the triple clamp, and they'll be torqued down when the forks are in the triple clamp as well. So you'll have the cap, spring seat, it's just a big washer, and then the fork spring itself. Now normally on forks you'll have to have some type of damping rod holder to keep the assembly from spinning inside the fork tube, and then you can go ahead and loosen the damping rod bolt here at the end. You also need that tool to properly torque it down for reassembly. So we have our bolt out. Now that that's out, there's a retaining clip that holds in your oil seal, and in this case it holds in the oil and the dust seal. So you're just going to pop the clip out. Now using a slide hammer motion, you get the fork to the top of its stroke, you'll feel it bottom out. Separate the fork. Now that you have your forks separated, this is the time you want to inspect all your parts. If they're worn out, they're going to be visually worn, and then you're going to want to replace them. Anytime you've disassembled your fork, you always want to plan on having a new fork seal to reinstall. So you have your retainer clip, your dust seal, your oil seal, your support washer for your oil seal, your outer guide bushing, your inner guide bushing, and your oil lock piece. While we're in our forks, we want to go ahead and remove our damper rod assembly and just clean it up and check it for any visible wear, damage, spring, the bushing. Make sure everything looks okay, and then set it aside for reassembly. Before we reassemble our forks, we're also going to want to have a new sealing washer for our damping rod bolt, and a new O-ring for our fork cap also. Before reassembly, the fork spring should also be checked for wear and damage and a measurement for fatigue. Now that we've disassembled our fork, cleaned up the parts, and reassembled the fork, which is basically just a reverse order of disassembly, we're now ready to drive in our fork seal, which we'll do now. Now that that's installed, we'll put our retaining clip in, and then we're ready to set our oil level and put our fork cap on, and the forks will be ready to go back into the bike.